humans, it's just Martine, and we're going to be rereading Kingdom Keepers 5 Shell Game. This one is for you, Eliza. This is my third time trying to make this video and trying to read this book. I'm on page 48, but I'm gonna go back to the beginning and skim the beginning. This is my least favorite of the Kingdom Keepers books. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I'm gonna link my playlist here. But this is my least favorite of the Kingdom Keepers books, and so it's just taking me time to get in. I picked it up, put it down, picked it up, put it down. But because of a specific readathon I'm doing this month, I've gotta read this. So it's one of my #1 priorities. That and actually finishing War and Peace, hopefully. I'm not sure that's gonna happen. I really hope that happens. This 5th book, it partially takes place in Orlando, where most of the series does, and then during the second half, they're on the cruise ship, and this is the only one of the books that ends on a real cliffhanger. I was super excited when this originally came out. I read it the day it came out on my Nook. I was in middle school at the time, only for it to be the worst of the books. Finn Whitman is absolutely unbearable in this book. I was so excited about the cruise ship element, and that did deliver, but Finn Whitman. This also represents a pivotal turning point in the series. It's suddenly much darker than the previous ones. Let's get to reading. Buckle up. I read 2 chapters and I have things to say. That's only 14 pages. This is gonna be a long one. Okay, so the first thing is the introduction of DHI 2.0. I love 2.0 because I think in the course of the first 4 books, you get really comfortable with the way that the DHI technology works, and it no longer becomes a struggle for the characters, to the point where even ones that have trouble turning into full holograms are starting to get it. So switching it up on them is fun, even though technically they're in less danger because of DHI 2.0. But I think that presents some interesting dynamics because it makes it harder for them to turn into DHIs when they're awake. And so in some ways it protects them less in that context. Additionally, it allows the series to get a lot darker and the villains to get a lot more violent without it seeming impossible that the characters survive. The second is that Finn Whitman, even though I'm going to rag on him a lot in this book, I'm going to give him props in this moment for drinking tea. He's like, I'm not gonna be able to fall back asleep, so I'm gonna drink a strong cup of tea. And then he goes back to sleep, which is confusing, but I loved that. The idea of Finn drinking tea is so wholesome. I want more of that wholesome energy from Finn Whitman, and I don't often get it, so the tea drinking just sent me. Philby, does he ever sleep? I'm concerned. I know most of them don't sleep very well because being a DHI doesn't count as sleep. It's a dreamlike state, but you still wake up exhausted because you've been running around the parks and stuff. But Philby is just awake at this time of night. It's 2:33 a.m. and Finn is like, I'm gonna text Philby so he can send me to this other park. And he's like, even though it's late at night, Philby's still gonna be awake. And that's concerning to me. I'm worried about Philby. Does Philby ever sleep, or is he just up doing research the whole time? I don't know. I don't know how to feel about this. And lastly, there's the running thing that makes me hate Finn Whitman in this book, which is his suspicions about Philby trying to take over as leader in the ways that he communicates with Wayne Moore. Philby has his own job in the group, and he needs to talk to Wayne for some of those purposes. He is the guy in the chair.
Guy in the chair.
But Finn is he's trying to take over from me, which makes Finn so poisonous and toxic in this book, and I hate it. I hate it. He doesn't try to talk to Wayne or Philby about how this makes him feel. He just gets mad about it. I don't like that. Go sit down and drink some tea instead, Finn. When I went to study for the GRE, there was a bunch of vocab that I had to learn, and one of the words I was like, I already know that, and I know because of Kingdom Keepers, and it's because of this book, and the word is torpor. I've seen it in lots of other books too, but this is the youngest audience that I've seen the book in, and they use it in relation to the state that Trinabog is in. So anyway, sometimes even reading middle grade and books for really young readers can help teach you words that you'll find helpful in the future. One example of the really dark and serious nature of this is the scene where a couple of kids try to drug Finn while he's sleeping and basically incapacitate him. So that's crazy. But this is why we root for the Kingdom Keepers, because as Finn said when he was admonishing one of the girls who tried to do it afterwards, we don't poison people, which is a good moral decision on the part of the Kingdom Keepers. I'm glad they don't poison people. Also, his line calling it the tragic kingdom sends me every time. The scene that I'm currently reading, where it's Maybach and Charlene's turn to defend base for the night, is the moment where I really start rooting for the idea of Maybach and Charlene as a couple, even though in it, Charlene, in her inner monologue, is I don't see why girls like Maybach blah, blah, blah. But I still like it for a couple reasons. One, it's just a cool and fun scene, and you get to see them interact one-on-one, which you don't often get to do. And then I also appreciate the way that Charlene stands up for Philby. So Charlene says, I'm just being pragmatic. And Maybach says, don't do that. Don't use words like that. Don't be like Philby and start showing off how smart you are. Which, first of all, he's acknowledging that she's smart. And not many people do that for Charlene. And then she says, Philby doesn't do that. Philby is just Philby. And I like that because she's like, that's not a problem with him. That's just who he is. That's just what he does. And I love that energy. Also, I love that Maybach just says what he hates about people to their faces. He goes, you know the problem with you? You get really negative when you're tired, which is like a valid thing to notice about a person. And I just love that he's like, you know what? I'm just gonna tell this to your face. So basically, in this scene, Charlene does this whole absolutely crazy acrobatic stunt thing off of a building and goes flying towards the ground. And then she lands, but Maybach sees her and worries that she's not going to land. And then he starts, he has like tears in his eyes. And she's like, are you crying? And he's like, no, I'm not crying. I just ran really fast. The wind got in my eyes. Anyway, but they share this touching moment, and he gives her all the credit for saving the base that night. And she has this bit where she says, that was the thing about Maybach. Just when she thought he was the biggest egomaniac of all time, he'd come out with something caring and thoughtful, completely unpredictable. Somewhere behind all his bold and brash statements was someone with a real heart, and it endeared him to her. And I love that. But then, of course, Ridley Pearson has to go and ruin it by having them hold hands at the end after she thinks, in any case, he was that different Maybach she liked better, and comment that it wasn't possessive or romantic, it was brotherly. And I hate him for that. I'll never forgive him. Wayne, at one point, he's explaining why they're going through the Panama Canal and why they're the first cruise ship company that gets to go through. And he's like, probably because we support family and family values. Also because we bid higher, and I thought that was hilarious. Also, upping the ante, not only are there legitimate death threats in this and people physically attacking the Kingdom Keepers, but when they're on the cruise ship, they're going to be in a finite amount of space, which Wayne pointed out is something that they haven't had to deal with yet. So it's like, ah. There's this whole bit about fame and how being adored is dangerous, but my favorite part of it is this sentence, Maybach could get into any club he wanted. Thankfully, he didn't want to get into any clubs, but at 15, he was underage. So what was with that? I don't know why, but I just love that. Along with the darker tone in this book and the books moving forward, we also get a huge expansion of the world. Not only because they're going to be leaving Florida in this, but because we're introducing so many new characters. So for instance, we're introducing all of the volunteer Kingdom Keepers, and then also we're introducing a new Fairly, the character of Maddie. So that's exciting. Finn right now is in Typhoon Lagoon, and it's a very confusing sequence for me. One, because I've never been to any of the Disney water parks, so I have no idea what he's actually doing, you know? And then second of all, there are a couple weird things. So he puts on his swim trunks and he has other clothes on, and then he goes to Typhoon Lagoon. And he's there and he immediately gets chased by these CPR dummies, right? And he goes down a water slide, fully clothed. So first of all, his shoes are soaking, and second of all, his clothes are. And then canonically, he takes his phone out of his pocket and it's dripping. So there goes his phone. Do they talk about replacing it ever? I don't know. But homeboy just ruined his phone. But you know, he was being chased. That's fair. But then later he goes to the wave thing to surf, whatever, and he undresses down to his swim trunks for it. And I'm like, homeboy, you already got everything wet. You know, like, why are you doing this? I don't get it. Then I had an issue where Stitch saved him and intervened in the CPR dummies that were chasing him. And Stitch is a bad guy in the third book, the opening sequence of the third book. So I don't know. You know, I always thought it was weird that Stitch dressed as Elvis Presley was a bad guy in this series, but now I'm just getting mixed signals. It makes sense for him to be a good guy because he's with Lilo, but it's just an inconsistency I thought I'd point out. I just read the scene where Maybach is leading a strike on the base. He's got his team of volunteer Kingdom Keepers and he's leading them with his epoxy to trap the Green Army soldiers. Anyway, Maybach as a leader and growing into leadership is something I just love so much. I've mentioned it in previous videos, but I used to not really care about Maybach as a character, but as I've grown up, he means everything to me. I have my all-time favorite characters, and then I have Maybach, who's grown to be a favorite Kingdom Keeper of mine. I love him. It makes me happy. I feel so bad for Finn. I get so mad at him at multiple points in this book, don't get me wrong, but for Maleficent to take his mom away from him, Not only do I feel bad for Finn, I feel bad for us. The readers, we all love Mrs. Whitman. This is devastating, heartbreaking, very difficult to read about. Finn says, Maleficent, I hate her. I'm going to kill her for this. And Amanda very wisely says, be careful she doesn't use that as a weapon against you. It's a great Amanda moment. Gotta say it. Also, is homeboy, like, how is he went home, he spent the night at Dillard's, and then he went home just to get his bike. He doesn't have any of his other belongings with him. As far as I'm concerned, his shoes are still wet, and he's leaving for the cruise today. I hope he sneaks back home and gets some stuff, or is he just gonna board the cruise like this? I don't know. These are my questions. Listen, I get that Finn has had a rough night. He's lost his mom, whatever. I mean, she's still alive, but like, she's ostensibly been lost. But now he's blaming Amanda for that? No. That's not how it works, Finn. They're boarding the cruise ship, yay! Also, the Kingdom Keepers are looking around and they're like, whoa, this is crazy. And Philby goes, yes, it's a feat of engineering. And Charlene says, really? Is that all you've got? Engineering? I'm taking a tally every time Finn Whitman upsets me in this book, and I'll share that, like, the total count at the end of this reread. But this scene that I just read, it's from page like 175 to like 182, and he made me mad on like 5 different occasions. Like, I kept putting down my pen for the tally mark, reading like a line, picking it back up. Are you serious? No. It's also hard to know because, like, Ridley Pearson does Philby so dirty in this book, but always from Finn's perspective. Like, nobody else's perspective is like, suddenly Philby is arrogant and superior, but Finn's does. And I'm like, so that's Finn's opinion. It's not the truth. Like, Philby's so great at what he does. He quizzed all the Kingdom Keepers in the different locations on the ship so that, like, they knew it, because they have a distinct disadvantage. They're used to operating in the Disney parks that they grew up going around, and now they're on this ship that they've never been on before, but thanks to Philby, they know exactly where they're going. There's this line that just made me laugh a little bit. It's talking about how Maleficent needs colder temperatures. It says, when jailed, her cell had been kept at 78 degrees Fahrenheit, and she'd been little more than a green-skinned jumpsuited woman with a superiority complex. Whenever Willa and Maybeth get a chance to work together, it's so fun for me to read because they give each other crap all the time. It starts with him saying, like, just be careful, those are heavy. And she's like, I've got it. You need to stop. Like, I may be a girl, but I can do this, which, go Willa. Then he manages to change the whole system that the cast members are doing everything, and it ruins their plan. And he says, admittedly, we've hit a setback. And she says, you're an idiot. And I love them. Throughout the course of the series, you rarely get to see the Kingdom Keepers like act or perform in any real way, because I mean, they go into the studios and they do their things, and sometimes they have to pretend they're their DHIs in order to get away from trouble. But usually they'll like stand on a parade float, and that's the extent of their appearance in the Disney parks. Like, they don't really perform anything aside from in the studio. And that's why the cruise ships are so fun, because the point is that the DHIs are being hosted on the cruise ship for the first time, and so they're making use of the fact that they have the Kingdom Keepers on board and they have them perform and make appearances and stuff. And for some reason, that's just such a fun element for me to read about. So like right now they're in the sail away party and I'm having a blast, even though things are turning dark and sinister, but watching them perform is great. This has to be the single most disgusting explanation for what a person sounds like. And the fact that it's referring to a teenage girl is gross. The description is, if you put hand cream all over a Nerf ball, that's how smooth her voice sounded. This is the introduction we get to Story Ming, who I also hate. So there's that. There's finally a plot hole glaring enough that I had to acknowledge it. And that's that when they first board the ship, Maybeck shows that he has the return. And now on page 238, they say they don't have the return, and so it has to be manual. I just checked and it was less than 100 pages ago. It's on page 178 that they show the return, and then on page 238, they're like, no, we don't have a return. There's so many moments in this book where at the end of a chapter, I feel like I should just go, dun, dun, dun. There are so many things I hate about Finn Whitman, especially in this book. But I have to admit that a lot of my leadership style comes from the comments he makes about leadership in his inner monologue, not necessarily his actions. In this one, he says the Keepers were a democracy, not a dictatorship, and while Finn accepted his role as leader, he interpreted the role as that of a filter. He was first a listener, decisions came later. But then he ruins it by a paragraph later thinking, I trust this girl because she can really kiss. So, still not feeling the best about him. No, they just implied that they have the return on the ship. It's been less than 20 pages since you said you didn't have it. I feel like around book 4, maybe 5, is when Ridley Pearson really starts using Maybeck's artist's eye all the time. I'm trying not to pause a lot while I'm actively reading this and instead take like a quick 1-second note to come back to it later, but I cannot ignore the fact that Finn Whitman crossed over with a Snickers bar in his pocket. Boys. This conversation between Charlene and Maybeck is great. Charlene says, I've had a crush on Eric, like Prince Eric from The Little Mermaid, since I was about 8. Maybeck says, and I thought you were crushing on me. Who says I'm not? She fired back, trying to get me jealous? Maybe. It's working, he said. Also, I don't understand. So I get that while they're 2.0 and they're full holograms, that the water didn't make them wet. But then there were moments where they were struggling and they were actually touching the water, so they were no longer pure holograms. So when they get back on the ship, why are they not soaked? I'm just past the halfway point of this book, so I'm going to end this vlog here and start a part 2. If you'd like to go ahead and give it a big thumbs up and comment down below who's your favorite Kingdom Keeper, and subscribe for more reading, writing, and college lifestyle content. And until next time, bye humans, bye!